What is good, everyone? It is your guy, Don James, and welcome back to another video. Inside Out 2. Boy, has this movie been killing it. So, what better time to stop and rank all the Pixar sequels? If you check out the first video on my channel, which I don't recommend you do, bro, if there was a video that was a blueprint for like everything wrong to do in a YouTube video, that would be a good candidate. But anyways, from that title alone, you can tell that my first video ranked all the Pixar sequels, but excluded the Toy Story sequels. So today, I'm going to rank all the Pixar sequels, including Toy Story. And by the way, yes, I'm including Monsters University. Technically, it is a prequel, but it is still a follow-up to the original work, and it continues the story, just in a way that looks in the past rather than the future. Also, I'm not including Lightyear because that's a spin-off, and spin-offs are not really follow-ups to original work. They just pluck an element from the original work and take it in an entirely new direction. So, yeah, to qualify for this list, you have to be a quill. Plus, I mean, come on, it's Lightyear. So overall, here are the 9 films that are going to be ranked. Got it? Alright, let's get started. Also, spoiler warning for all 9 films. If there was ever a Pixar movie that was the true embodiment of the excrement that exits a dog's anus, it would be Cars 2. Look, I know some people have nostalgia for this, but I just cannot get on that train. I watched this right after watching the first Cars movie, and I loved the first Cars movie. I was so surprised by how good it was with such a seemingly slow-paced story. Within the first minute, I could tell something was wrong. Where was the racetrack? Why is there a car on a zip line? Why is a car whipping out a gun from its wheel? Why am I hearing spy music? Where's lightning? Where's Radiator Springs? Neatly put, this was just an absolute misfire and blunder of a direction to take. With a first movie whose charm was built on its dynamic race sequences and the beauty of small towns, this movie just says screw all of that and make a spy comedy instead. And obviously the main character swap was a gigantic blunder. We literally saw Lightning McQueen become a complete racer in the prior movie, and now we have a great plotline set up with the Grand Prix, and we decided to completely sideline that in favor of Mater's struggles with feeling stupid. Oh, you don't care? This movie belongs on a disc for a direct-to-DVD spin-off, not a big-budget theatrical sequel to the first movie and a follow-up to Toy Story 3 that directly killed the golden age. Honestly, if I had not watched this one seconds after the first one, I probably would have thought it was just kind of mediocre. But having seen it right after the first Cars movie, I think this is the most disappointing film that I've ever watched, and I hate this film. Sure, it has good animation as you'd expect, and maybe 1 or 2 funny jokes, and when the Grand Prix does happen, it can be pretty engaging. But no, this movie really is not redeemable. I think it sucks, and it's easily Pixar's worst film. Moving on. Yeah, the real Cars 2. So, is Cars 3 a bad movie? No, definitely not. Is Cars 3 a great movie? No, definitely not. This is a movie that I would consider a good enough overall film, but just kind of okay by Pixar standards. Had Cars 2 been a proper film, this movie would have felt like a solid bookend to the trilogy, but it almost inherently feels kind of like a fast forward where we go straight from him being a hotshot rookie to almost retired, and it's a lot harder to actually feel that passage of time. Nevertheless, there's still some pretty dynamic racing sequences. The concept of the next generation cars was pretty cool, looked awesome, but kind of underdeveloped. And Lightning's crash was, again, pretty good, but underdeveloped. Felt like it went pretty quickly from a dramatic crash that the teaser trailers hyped up so much. And it didn't really live up to the hype. I mean, it really didn't matter too much in the grand scheme of the movie. It just kind of showed that he was getting old, but we already knew that, and it didn't really have a lasting impact. By the way, what's with Sally just dissing Lightning and calling him stinky after he got into his crash? No, I'm just playing, but what is with Pixar just kind of like turning these implied romances into just kind of like more insulting, I guess? Anyways, not that big of a deal. Just kind of thought of it while I was making this vid. I still feel like this movie just kind of lacked a little bit of that small town charm of the first movie. And most of the characters from Radiator Springs just kind of get sidelined entirely, which was very understandable on Mater's part, but still it was a little disappointing. By the way, Cars 3 gave no mention of Holly at all. She probably dumped him the second Cars 2 ended. Anyways, Cruz is a pretty good character as well, and I have to say, I die laughing at this scene every time.
Get these things off of me!
Are you all right?
You have crashed.
I've crashed.
The big problem with this movie is the third act fumbles the ball pretty bad. I mean, I have no problem with Cruz deciding to take over the race, but doing it in the middle of the race, I don't care if that's a NASCAR rule. I don't care if Pixar made that up. That is an insanely stupid rule, and that in no way should be the culmination and payoff of Lightning McQueen's career and Cruz's beginning. So yeah, that kind of irked me a bit, but overall, Cars 3 is a fine movie. Probably didn't need to be a trilogy, but Cars 3 works for what it is. So right off the bat, Finding Dory is a more proper way to elevate a comedic side character to the lead role. Dory has more depth than Mater does, and the genre of Finding Nemo can translate better to side characters than the Cars franchise, because Mater's not a race car. Also, Dory's not nearly as annoying as Mater. This was just a nice and easygoing adventure that made a pretty smart decision to take place at a Marine Life Institute. We got to see more aquatic characters, and it did feel like kind of a fresh and new environment compared to just the ocean. Now, is it as vast and grand of a scale as the ocean? I mean, certainly not, but it doesn't really need to be. It's certainly not on the level of the first Finding Nemo, but it is a really good movie. Hank, to me, may be a top 10 Pixar side character. The way he moves, the way he looks, his whole sarcastic cynicism, all of it just worked so well for me. And his rapport with Dory and the way she tests his patience just felt like a very great pairing. Marlin and Nemo were just kind of like, whatever, I guess. Like, Nemo was just like a complete background character to me. And I do feel like what Marlin said to Dory after they were attacked felt more jerkish and out of character just to kick the plot in motion.
You can go wait over there. Go wait over there and forget. It's what you do best.
Which, by the way, I do feel like this movie's biggest issue is probably just that it has too many conveniences. Like, how did the squid just get knocked over as he was about to eat Nemo? How did Marlin and Nemo just perfectly time the water fountain thingies to get into the bucket? That was just way too silly. And, I mean, the truck scene was also over the top, but I can't lie and say I didn't have some fun with it, but it certainly is kind of a contrivance. So overall, a really good movie, but compared to Pixar's other sequels, it's kind of on the lower end. Now, you can find a ton of hate for this movie all over the internet, and I can understand some of the criticisms. Like, you wait 14 years to make a sequel to one of the best Pixar movies, a movie that already ended on a cliffhanger, and you essentially tell a story that mostly just mimics the same one as the first movie, but with Elastigirl?
Huh?
Yeah, that can be kind of underwhelming, and I can understand why people could feel that. But for me, I still had a great time with this movie. Brad Bird just knows how to craft very exciting and engaging action and fantastic style. I loved pretty much all of the family dynamics in this movie. Elastigirl getting to do undercover hero work, especially with her custom-made bike. Mr. Incredible having to stay at home and deal with Violet's boyfriend issues, Dash's homework, and Jack's powers. All of that was very funny.
I just want to be a good dad.
You're not good. You're super.
Which is another highlight of this film. This is one of the funniest Pixar films. Jack is of course the standout. So when it comes to the animation, the action, the music, the style, the themes, the humor, all of that works incredibly well. What doesn't work is the villain. I don't know what they were going for with Evelyn Dever, but I don't see how you go 14 years preparing a story and what you end up getting is a very plot hole filled Syndrome knockoff. To be honest, Screenslaver or even maybe the Underminer probably would have been better villains, but Evelyn has such a nonsensical motivation that also just makes no sense with their plan to make superheroes legal just to make them illegal again because her father was too stupid to put the phones inside of the safe room. Plus, this movie does sometimes seem to forget that it is still trying to be a kid-friendly movie. And there can be sequences of pretty lengthy political talking. And one more thing is that Dash is kind of underutilized. So, a great film, but a derivative one. Now it does kind of surprise me that Inside Out 2 is only number 5 on this list. Which just tells you how phenomenal Pixar is. I honestly think their sequels probably get a little too much hate. Make no mistake, I think Inside Out 2 is a great film. The best thing that it does is that it simply returns to Pixar's classic roots and it actually expands upon the first movie in a fantastic and logical way. As Riley gets older and prepares to enter puberty, she experiences new emotions and new areas of her mind to explore. And I absolutely love just how many metaphors were in this movie. There's so much to dissect, so much to think about. It's great. I mean, come on, like, sarcasm? I mean, like, that is the most clever thing. Anyways, I also thought Anxiety was a fantastic villain. I really didn't go that deep in the trailers besides Anxiety introducing herself. So when Anxiety and the new emotions bottled up the old ones, it caught me off guard. Speaking of the new emotions, embarrassment and ennui are pretty solid, but envy does feel pretty underutilized. But I also did just like how much the original gang was all together in this movie. And the scene in the vault was just hilarious. Now I will say that the introduction of Riley's puberty felt kind of like a parody. Like, I get that moodiness is a part of puberty, but this movie just kind of goes so over the top with how intense Riley's mood swings are. And I will also say in the middle of the film when Joy got so mad at the emotions, I literally almost thought that scene was supposed to be a joke, like, look, Joy is mad. I didn't even realize that it was actually supposed to be an emotional moment. So I don't think that landed as well as they were trying to make it, but overall I do think this movie had some solid emotional moments. And I really loved what they did with the ending. Like, I thought that the first movie had the emotions pretty much dictating every thought and action that Riley took. Like, Riley was completely lacking any kind of sentience or control over her emotions, which wasn't too bad, but it did feel maybe a tad excessive. But at the end of the movie, when Riley has a more fully formed sense of self, and the emotions are able to take kind of a step back from all their control and allow Riley to make a little bit more decisions, I thought that was a very smart move, and it made me understand that the first movie was more so Riley's younger stages in which kids do tend to be more under the control of their immediate emotions. but as you get older, you gain more control of them, and that's what we were seeing with Riley. So yeah, a great movie. Maybe as I watch it more, it'll move up this list, but as of now, it's right here. So I'm not sure if it's controversial to have Toy Story 4 at number 4, but I honestly don't even really care. I'm going to be doing a 5-year retrospect on this movie in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. But for me, my opinions on this movie have been extremely weird. When I first watched it in 2019, it was actually my second favorite Toy Story movie. As I had more time to think about it, I began to notice more flaws with how it was constructed. And so after a while, it became easily my least favorite Toy Story movie. Still thought it was great, but not on par with the other 3. However, since then I've watched it about 3 or 4 times, and every time I watch it, I like it more. So while I still do think it is the weakest Toy Story movie, I do think it still kind of is on par with the other 3. First, I'll just say that this is probably the best looking animation that I've just ever seen in any Pixar movie, and I still don't think it's been topped by anything they've done since. It looks gorgeous. This is also probably the funniest Pixar movie, but the big thing that carries this film is the character arc of Woody. He has to face the reality that the kid that now owns him doesn't value him as much as Andy does. And with that comes a pretty solid inner journey where Woody has to discover his new purpose through rescuing Bonnie's new favorite toy. And beyond the theme of finding new purpose, I thought the theme that was explored through Forky was also quite solid. On the surface, Woody's relation to Forky can seem almost a little bit like a copy of Woody's relation to Buzz in Toy Story 1, but looking a little bit further, there's a little bit more value and insight to Forky's dilemma. Both the toys in Bonnie's room, as well as us as an audience, just view Forky as nothing more than some scraps from trash, and that's how Forky views himself in a comedic way. But this movie emphasizes the worth that everyone has, no matter how weird they seem or what disability they may have. Also, touching on Forky, he's another phenomenal side character, and just the side characters in general, all the new toys were just pretty much great. Key and Peele's Ducky and Bunny, Keanu Reeves' Duke Kaboom, they were very funny and delightful characters. Giggle McDimples was a little bit more forgettable, but she was okay. And Bo Peep, it was enjoyable to see her back. I thought that her character shift was logical, and overall she was just very adventurous and dynamic. I do have to say I did not love her relation with Woody in this movie. I felt like she was a bit too much of a jerk to him sometimes, and overall it just seemed very awkward how they seemed to shy away from really showing them as a couple. They just seemed like awkward friends or something, and that was just a bad choice to me. On some other negatives, Gabby Gabby is the worst villain of the Toy Story movies. I thought her ending was pretty sweet, and her talk with Woody was pretty nice as well. But other than that, she just has a very clunky plan. How does she know that Woody's just going to come back for Forky just because Bonnie wrote her name on his sticks? She doesn't know, anything about Woody. Also, this movie struggles with trying to make her sympathetic, but they do it in a manner that makes her come off way more manipulative than sympathetic. So, I did not love Gabby Gabby. And, of course, the biggest problem with this movie is that the original gang are essentially bench warmers. Especially Jessie. They could have made a great double date kind of movie with Buzz and Jessie with Woody and Bo, but for some reason they just left Jessie to do nothing more than stick a stupid nail in a truck. And Buzz was okay. I know people hated his little gimmick. I thought it was the equivalent of essentially a person following fortune cookies, but it's still not good enough to be Buzz's only character arc, so I didn't love that. And similar to Finding Dory, some of the ending goes off the rails, but I can't lie and say I did not love this ending. It definitely did make me tear up, and I thought it was an emotionally solid ending. I was okay with Woody leaving as he discovered his new purpose. One thing I noticed with Toy Story 4 and Incredibles 2 is I feel like they elevate comedy very highly at the expense of maybe other important aspects of storytelling. And I think that's why this movie hasn't aged well for many people. Clearly, I'm not one of those people. I'm thinking about making a video about Toy Story 4 and Incredibles 2. So if you're interested in that, comment down below. Overall, I do think Pixar made a poor decision by calling this Toy Story 4. This really should have just been called Woody, and I think its reputation would have been significantly better. But, you know, that probably wouldn't have been as helpful for branding or whatever. But as a Toy Story sequel, it can feel a little bit unnecessary. As its own epilogue, it's really fantastic. So, while I don't think it's the most necessary film, I do think it's still a great film, and I do think it matches a lot of the highs of the original trilogy. Toy Story 3 is fire. I'm not gonna lie, when I saw this as a kid, I actually didn't love it. I had thought that turning Andy into a college student took away a lot of the nostalgic charm of the first two movies, and I also thought it didn't have enough of the humor of the first two. Kid me was extremely wrong. I've grown to appreciate this movie a lot more and see why it's a fitting conclusion to the Toy Story franchise. To Andy's story. Well, if Andy returns in Toy Story 5, then that really does cheapen a lot of the impact of this movie. Like, it's not even an ending to the trilogy, nor is it even an ending to Andy's story with the toys. I don't know, man. I have no clue what they're going to be doing with that movie. But it better be good. Not just good, but top tier Pixar. Anyways, what I love most about this movie is that it has the best adventure of the Toy Story films. Like, Toy Story 1 was just kind of like a buddy return home story. Toy Story 2 was like a rescue mission, and Toy Story 4 was just another rescue mission. Toy Story 3 is just this epic prison break with all these new toys and this elaborate daycare environment with all of these walls and cameras that have to be accounted for. It's just epic. And beyond that, the character dynamics are just fantastic. Like, Woody's journey in this movie was a perfect continuation of Toy Story 2. Like, Toy Story 2 posed the question of, what happens when Andy grows up? Is it better for Woody to just go off and be in a museum? And Woody says, no. Even though he knows the day will come that Andy inevitably grows up, Woody will still cherish the time he has with Andy before that.
You're right, Prospector. I can't stop Andy from growing up. But I wouldn't miss it for the world.
And this movie brings it to that logical finish point, where Woody truly has to come to terms with the fact that Andy has grown up. And given that he was Andy's favorite toy, this creates a very understandable tension and rift between him and the other toys, especially when the mishap occurs and they almost get thrown out. Lotso is also a fantastic villain. I mean, he looks like such a plush, cuddly teddy bear, and he acts so nice and kind initially, but my goodness is he ruthless. Like, I remember watching this in the theaters, and the toys had literally saved Lotso's life twice, and he was cool with abandoning them.
Where's your kid now, Sheriff?
That is some hardcore vicious stuff. And of course, the ending is what this movie is most well known for, and why so many people didn't want any future movies. And it is a fantastic and heartwarming ending. I don't think people need to throw out Toy Story 4 because this ending was so good. I think you could just view this as a nice closure to Andy's time with the toys. I don't know if he's going to return again, but for what we know now, this was a fitting conclusion to Andy's time with the toys. I still would say that this movie could have used more humor. Like, it's definitely the darkest and most serious of the Toy Story movies, and I don't necessarily think that makes it as engaging or fun as the other three, but that really doesn't hold it back that much. This is still a fantastic movie. So it may be a hot take to have Monsters University this high. I know this movie has more of an underrated reputation, but I don't know how many people would put it at number 2. But I'm just going to be honest, this is definitely a personal favorite for me. Despite its rather harsh theme, this is still just such a bright and feel-good movie to me. First off, the setting is just breathtaking. Just the look of the campus, the creativity of the monsters, it is all fantastic. In fact, this movie played some influence in where I wanted to go to college. Quick disclaimer, Don James is not a delusional idiot that solely bases degree decisions off an animated movie. It served as a small part of many factors that played into his decision on where to further his education. Thank you. Mike and Sully are delightful as always, and I really love the way that they juxtapose their characters, where Mike has all the knowledge but none of the talent, and Sully has all the talent but none of the knowledge, all culminating into a phenomenal finale with the big scare. And speaking of that finale, that's probably what this movie is most well known for, is its fantastic third act message, where the movie actually counters a lot of common Disney tropes, and animated tropes in general, to be honest, where instead of the hero always achieving their dreams, it shows a realistic, somewhat harsh but very much true portrayal that sometimes you may do everything right, but yet still you don't get to achieve the dream that you hoped for. But that doesn't mean that there isn't some other great purpose and talent that you may discover along the way. The scare games were pure fun, and I really liked the fraternities all around. Like all of the other monsters in Uzma Kappa were very good, and also the antagonists in Aurora Mega Roar, they were pretty solid as well. And it was cool to see kind of a little bit of why Randy eventually turned on Sully. Now, one issue that I kind of have with this movie is that it always feels a little weird to me how Mike and Sully managed to become the top scarers at like the most coveted job in the monster town. But yet, it's not like they dropped out of college or something. They got expelled. So to me, it always feels a little bit weird that like you go from being expelled from one of the top universities in your society to becoming the top scarers. Like an expulsion seems like a pretty severe thing. So that always felt a little weird to me. It's not a huge issue I have with it, but it always does kind of throw me off a little. Also, while I did very much enjoy the scare games, it does always feel a little off to me as they progress. Like it almost feels like the writers sort of had some great ideas on how to start the scare games and build intrigue, but then when they were starting to montage through it, they just kind of like threw in some random games. Like, if you remember at the beginning of that movie, that crow monster was hyping up the scare games as like these epic, intense things, and you would think the further you get along in them, the more intense they become. And yet, like what? You get to the second to last challenge and it's hide and seek?
Huh?
And they have like another one that's just a maze? Like, it feels like they were not as intense as they should have been. Like, they started out pretty good with like these glowing balls that swell you up, and also the monster librarian, but after that it feels like they just kind of randomly rushed through it without putting enough thought into it, which does make the pacing feel a little bit off. And my last critique was just that, Dean Hardscrabble probably should be fired. Like, I don't know any kind of dean that could be so obviously discriminatory and literally challenge a student to expel them from campus if they lose some games. But I mean, I get it. You had to add some kind of stakes to the story, so it's fine. Overall, I really love this movie. And I'm not gonna lie, I do like it more than Monsters Inc. There was a period of time where I was grappling with which one do I actually like more. And if I'm gonna be honest, I do actually prefer this movie over Monsters Inc. It's funny, it's lively, has a fantastic theme, it's creative in its world building, and it did factor in a little to the college I decided to go to. And I liked the college that I went to, so I give some of that credit to this movie too. Also, did I mention that this movie has a great score soundtrack? Like that whole Sign me up for a record label. I'm ready. Toy Story 2. Now, my opinions and rankings of the Toy Story movies have constantly fluctuated. But one thing that I always knew is that I liked Toy Story 2 more than Toy Story 1. So in case you weren't paying attention, it's my favorite Toy Story movie. I hate how often I see people put this near the bottom of their Toy Story rankings. Okay, yeah, I know most people have Toy Story 4 now. But when talking about the original trilogy, I feel like most people tend to have this near the bottom from what I see. And it's like they deem it a great film that's still on par with the other two, but more forgettable. And I just don't agree with that, man. From top to bottom, it feels like this movie just tried improving on everything that the first film did. It's way more emotionally potent. The character arcs are stronger. The animation is stronger. The humor is stronger. The story is more expansive. The side characters are more likable and present. Jessie is one of the best written female characters ever. The villain's better. I mean, just all around, it just feels like Toy Story 2 leveled up on the first one. It's like, I feel like the first one maybe just has more of the upper hand when it comes to its status as an icon, pioneering the new age of CGI animation, being the first Pixar film, and I guess the one a lot of kids grew up watching more often. But I definitely feel like Toy Story 2 always had higher quality than the first one. Always. As I touched on a little bit when talking about Toy Story 3, this movie has phenomenal thematic weight where it poses the question to Woody, would he rather be in a museum as this special iconic toy that'll be remembered for generations, or would he rather be with Andy and know that one day Andy will outgrow him? And that is just such a smart dilemma to give a toy, especially a favorite toy that's more likely to take it harder when they're forgotten or when their playtime is being outgrown by the kid. And I love the way that they pit him against Jessie, who experienced losing a kid and has just one of the most heart-wrenching, emotional moments in Pixar through her song.
Within my heart when she
And Stinky Pete, who I'd say is the best villain in the Toy Story franchise, and perhaps the second best villain in Pixar altogether, only behind Syndrome. Stinky Pete starts out so kind and persuasive to Woody, but when Woody sets his mind against Pete's wishes, his turn to evil makes complete sense given his history of sitting in a box all the time and realizing that his attempts to kind of manipulate and persuade Woody didn't work. It's like it's a logical and smart way of doing it to his villain, not just doing some kind of stupid, out of left field, make them act super nice and then all of a sudden, for the sake of shock and subversion, make them evil. And he even foreshadowed Hollywood, and Buzz's whole journey with the gang was also great, especially when you get to the point of the duplicate Buzz, and you just get to see all of the growth of Buzz Lightyear. And of course, Zurg provided a nice little minor villain and Star Wars parody.
I'll never give in. You killed my father.
No, Buzz. I am your father.
Really? Well, not according to this stupid movie. So, yeah, Toy Story 2 to me is kind of underrated in a way. The only negative I would point to is that I always felt the scene with the traffic cones and the cars felt a little bit too gimmicky. But besides that, Toy Story 2 just packs up all of the best elements of animation to me and is definitely the best Pixar sequel. Wow, this video took longer than I expected, but thanks to all you who watched to the end. Be sure to rank your Pixar sequels in the comments section. Also, if you haven't already, check out my video where I talk about the significance of the Inside Out franchise and what it means for Pixar as a whole. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.